I came home without warning. After completing my last mission, I discovered my son was dying alone in the intensive care unit. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law was partying with her friends on a yacht in the Gulf of Horizon. So I froze every account immediately. An hour later, she lost her mind when she found out. I'm glad you're here. Stay to the end and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this story reaches. I stepped onto Harborview International Airport just as the sun began to rise, a golden light cutting through the terminal's glass walls. The old military duffel, frayed at the corners, rested by my feet like a faithful travel companion for more than 40 years. On my wrist, my father's pocket watch vibrated softly whenever I moved, as if reminding me of the promise I made when I was young. Always come back home. That promise weighed more than ever now. At 69, newly retired after my last mission, I had given my entire life to the United States Marine Corps. From hostage rescue operations in Houston to endless days evacuating people during a devastating earthquake, I had worn the years like a second skin. But today, I only wanted to be a father, an old black man with sore knees and a heart that still beat like a drum when my son's name crossed my mind. I was anxious to hold Michael, my boy, after so many years. I dragged the duffel out of baggage claim with the same speed and precision as always. Outside, the morning sun already began to burn. I raised my hand for a taxi, climbed in, and told the driver, "For 20, Maple Street, please." I tried to keep my voice steady, but on the inside, emotion slammed into me like the nearby surf. I imagined Michael opening the door with that radiant smile, sitting at the table together and talking about everything I'd missed. In just half an hour, I'd be with my son at last. The radio hummed with military news, reports I'd listened to daily. That meant nothing to me now. Yesterday, I concluded my last strategic advisor mission for NATO in an anti-terror operation in South America. 40 years of service, from stopping weapons smuggling on the border to sleepless nights in the jungle, fell behind me like distant echoes. I stared out the window in silence. The blue expanse of water stretched to the horizon. The waves glittered as if trying to drag me back into those days. But my mind was only with Michael and the little house, where I had stashed so many hopes. The taxi took the familiar coastal road, where the palms still swayed the same way they did the day I left. But when we stopped in front of Michael's place, my chest lurched. The house was dark, curtains drawn, not a single light on. I hauled the duffel up to the porch, a sharp unease growing inside me. I rang the bell. The sound echoed in the silence without answer. I knocked harder. Again. Nothing. A strange quiet, as if the house had been abandoned. I walked into the yard and looked around. The mailbox was stuffed with crumpled flyers. They piled up along the path, as if no one had touched them in a long time. My heart raced. A dark premonition pressed down on my ribs. I had sent money faithfully to Michael and Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, to keep the household steady. I believed everything was fine, that my son was living without problems. But now, in front of this cold house, I wondered what was happening. Just then I saw Mrs. Thompson, Michael's neighbor, watering flowers across the street. She'd lived here since I was still running field ops, always kind, always telling stories about the neighborhood kids. I called out, "Mrs. Thompson." She looked up, eyes wide with surprise. "Mr. Harris, Lord have mercy, you're back. But you haven't heard." My legs trembled as I hurried across. "Heard what? Where's Michael?" I asked, fighting the break in my voice. She set the watering can on the ground, compassion filling her gaze. "Michael's been at St. Gabriel Medical Center for 2 weeks. The ambulance came at midnight. I saw the logo clear as day." She paused, lowered her voice. "And Vanessa, my grandson, said she posted on social media. She's out on a yacht in the Gulf of Horizon." I froze, like the world caved in beneath my feet. Michael in the hospital, 2 weeks, and Vanessa, the woman I trusted with my son's care, out partying on a yacht. I felt the blood drain from my face, my heart pounding in painful spikes. "Do you know where St. Gabriel is?" I asked hoarse. Mrs. Thompson nodded and pointed me the way. Without another thought, I stepped into the street and flagged a taxi. St. Gabriel Medical Center, fast as you can. I told the driver, and it came out like an order. Dozens of questions collided in my head. What had happened to my son? Why had they rushed him in? And Vanessa? How could she be celebrating in luxury while my boy lay sick in a hospital? Sitting in the taxi, my chest burned. I clenched my father's pocket watch so hard my knuckles went white. Michael, my son, the boy who chased me along the shore, who wrapped me up in a hug every time I came home from long deployments. He was in a hospital, and I, a father who had spent a lifetime protecting others, hadn't even known he needed me. I blamed myself for the months and years spent away, for sending only money and believing it was enough for him to have a good life. But now I only wanted to reach him, to see him, to know he was alive, that he was okay. We pulled up to St. Gabriel's entrance, and the noon sun blinded me. I paid the driver, dragged my bag to the doors, and tried to control my breathing so panic wouldn't spill over. The lobby was crowded, voices, footsteps, the loudspeaker calling patients, a chaotic kind of music. I went straight to reception where a young nurse flipped through files. "I'm looking for Michael Harris," I said, my voice dry, each word an effort. She glanced up, held my gaze, then scanned the system. "ICU. 5th floor, room 512. She answered in a practiced tone. I didn't thank her. I ran for the elevator. "Hold the door, please," I called as it began to close. A middle-aged man caught it with his hand and waited for me to step inside the narrow cab. The sterile sting of disinfectant hit me, and I fought the urge to gag. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, the ICU corridor stretched out cold and hushed, broken only by the steady beep of machines. I walked fast, my old boots striking the tile in a dry cadence. The door to 512 was ajar. A white light slipped through and made me hesitate. I pushed it open gently, as if afraid to shatter something fragile. Michael lay there, in that white bed, surrounded by tubes and machines. His eyes closed, his face pale, so thin I barely recognized him. The ventilator sealed over his mouth, each breath so faint I had to hold my own to hear it. My heart clenched. That wasn't my Michael, the boy who ran behind me at the beach, the man who hugged me hard every time I came home. It was only a shadow, a broken fragment of my son. A doctor stood in the corner, name badge reading Dr. Julian Reed. He studied the monitor, focused but distant. He turned to me. "Are you family?" I nodded, voice cracking. "I'm his father, William." He inclined his head and gestured toward Michael. "He has terminal stomach cancer. The situation is very serious. If it had been treated earlier, it might have been different." His voice was flat, like a routine briefing, but every word was a blade in my chest. "Cancer. Terminal." I repeated the words, trembling, refusing to believe them. An hour earlier I had imagined hugging my boy, hearing him tell me about his days without me. I thought I'd see him healthy, smiling. Not like this, caught between lifeless machines. How did this happen? Why didn't anyone tell me? I pleaded. Dr. Reed shook his head, a flicker of compassion in his eyes. "No one has visited since he was admitted. We tried to reach family, but couldn't make contact. No one came." The sentence struck me like a fist. Vanessa, the woman I entrusted with my son, where was she? Mrs. Thompson's words echoed. The post, the yacht, the parties. Rage burned through me, smothered by grief. I stepped to the bed and took his cold hand. His skin felt like paper, blue veins raised beneath. "Michael, it's Dad," I whispered, holding back tears. "I'm here, son." His lips moved. His eyelids trembled and opened, clouded, but with a familiar glimmer. "Dad," he breathed, so faint I had to lean close. "Dad, I love you." Before he finished, the heart monitor released a long, piercing tone that sliced the air. I gripped his hand. "Michael, no, son." I cried, but Dr. Reed pulled me back, calling for nurses. "Sir, please step out. Let us work." His order was firm. They moved me into the hall. Nurses rushed by. Machines shrieked. Urgent voices tangled in the air. I covered my face and sobbed without control. "Please, don't take him," I kept repeating, as if the words could hold him in place. Minutes later, Dr. Reed stepped out, peeled off his gloves, and shook his head. "I'm very sorry," he said, voice low. "We did everything we could." I felt hollowed out. My legs failed, and I staggered away from the ICU without daring to see the white sheet drawn over my boy's face. Michael was gone. Just as I had finally come home, I hadn't managed to tell him how much I loved him, or how sorry I was for leaving him alone. I stood in the corridor under a cold, white light, swallowed by an immense emptiness, as if the whole world had collapsed. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and dialed Vanessa. Music blasted on the other end, laughter, voices, like the center of a party. "What is it?" she answered, flat and bored. I swallowed, tried to keep my voice steady. "Michael died." There was a few seconds of silence. Then she answered like she was talking about the weather. "Yeah, I'm busy. We'll talk later." The line went dead. I stood there, motionless. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. Vanessa didn't ask a single thing. No sadness. She was partying while my son breathed his last. I turned away from the ICU and walked toward the exit of St. Gabriel, the midday light hitting my face, but all I felt was cold. An old man's cold that sat in the bones and refused to leave. I don't remember how long I wandered those corridors, only that I had to reach the administrative office to start my son's death certificate. Death certificate. The phrase hammered at my skull until hope splintered. My boy, the child I raised and loved with everything I had, was about to become paper and ink, an entry in a hospital file. A young nurse with her hair pulled tight into a high ponytail handed me a clear plastic bag. "These are Mr. Harris's belongings," she said, voice gentle but hurried by the churn of a workday. I took the bag with trembling hands and peered through the plastic. Michael's wristwatch, the worn leather wallet I'd given him on his 20th birthday, his phone with a scratched screen. I opened the wallet, searching for something of him, some imprint of the life he'd been living, but it was bare. Only his documents and a bent old photo with frayed corners. In the picture, Michael and I stood on a beach. He just a kid, grinning with a red kite clutched in his hands. I pressed the photo to my chest, terrified that if I let go, the memories would blow away like sand in wind. I asked for the full medical record. Dr. Reed came in with a thick file and laid it on the desk. "Everything is here," he said. I flipped through pages, admission dates, lab results, the final diagnosis, advanced gastric cancer with metastasis. My vision blurred. The doctor lowered his voice. If he had been brought in a few months earlier, he might have had a year or two. But when he arrived, his condition was already too severe. I nodded, unable to speak, my chest tightening around those stolen years, 1 or 2 more birthdays, maybe a summer on the porch, maybe a laugh I could have heard one more time. "Who's listed as the primary contact?" I asked the nurse on duty, voice raw. She checked her notebook. "Vanessa Lopez. We called many times, sent messages. We couldn't reach her." I went cold from scalp to heel. Vanessa, the same woman I'd sent money to every month, the one I trusted to keep my son's world steady, never came. Not once. She didn't even pick up a phone. Michael's phone buzzed from inside the hospital bag. The screen lit up, Vanessa. For a heartbeat, I wanted to answer, to shout, to ask how anyone could be so cruel. But I couldn't face her voice. Not after everything. I let it ring until the screen dimmed, then slipped the bag into my duffel and left the administrative office. Downstairs, the morgue clerk slid a transport form across the counter so Michael's body could be moved to the military funeral home. I took the pen, but my hand shook so hard the signature came out as jagged scratches. "Are you all right?" the clerk asked, concerned. I nodded, though I wasn't. How could I be? I had just lost my only son. Still, I finished the form's rows and stepped back into the noon glare, letting the tears run at last. I stood by the curb, sun burning my shoulders, feeling nothing but hurt. Hurt for my boy's lonely last days, without his father's hand to hold. I blamed myself for the years swallowed by duty missions, deployments, far-off deserts, and damp jungles, believing that money would be enough, believing Vanessa would care for him the way family should. I had been wrong. The greatest mistake of my life was trusting a heart I never truly understood. In my pain, the image of Vanessa returned, sharp as glass. The phone call with music blaring, her laugh threading through the background. A yacht somewhere out on glittering water. She burned my money, the same money I sent to cushion Michael's fight, on nonsense. Champagne, silk, and sunlit excess, while my son lay alone among beeping machines. That indifference was a blade twisting deep, carving rage into grief. I called an old brother-in-arms, Lieutenant Colonel James Ortega, now at the Defense Financial Management Agency. "James, I need to see you today," I said, voice steady despite the tears still drying on my cheeks. "Well, what's going on? Are you all right?" he asked. "I'll tell you when I get there. Please make time." He didn't hesitate. "Be here this afternoon." I grabbed a cab back to Michael's house at 420 Maple. Sitting in the back seat, I squeezed my father's pocket watch, the same one that had ticked through firefights, briefings, and homecomings. It had always meant come back. But I had come back too late. On the porch, the keys jingled in my palm while I found the right one. The small, cold one I'd kept all these years, a thin tether to my son. I opened the door. The smell of stale air struck me. A house left too long without care. I flipped the switch. A jaundiced light spread over a living room in disarray. Wine glasses crusted with residue on the table, dust spreading across wood. Empty takeout boxes sagging on the floor. I stood still, taking it in. This had been Michael's home, the place I pictured him happy with Vanessa. Now it was chaos, just like my heart. I slid my duffel by the old couch and moved to Michael's desk in the corner. A brown envelope lay under scattered papers. I opened it, pulse thudding as I pulled out a stack of invoices and receipts. One read plainly, "Yacht rental, Gulf of Horizon, $150,000, paid with Michael Harris's credit card." The date was last week, while Michael was in the ICU. I turned to the next, Cartier jewelry, $195,000, 3 days ago. My hand clenched so hard the paper bit my palm. Vanessa had drained my son's money, my money, on toys and shine while he was fighting for breath. I photographed every page, each amount, each date, each signature, and compiled them into a folder on my phone. Every click was a stab, but I couldn't stop. I needed proof. I needed the whole truth if I was going to confront her. I hit video call. The screen brightened, and there she was, Vanessa on the deck of a yacht, the sea behind her a relentless blue, friends laughing around her. She wore a silk dress stamped with an enormous Chanel logo, sunglasses like a shield, a cocktail sweating in her hand. The image slapped me. "What?" she said, distracted, as if I'd interrupted room service. I drew a breath and leveled my tone, though fire rolled under my ribs. "You know Michael is dead, and you're this calm." Her face froze for a few seconds, lips pressed. Then she shrugged. "I know. He'd been sick for a long time. Nothing I could do. Dying was just a matter of time." She said it soft, like it was weekend weather. Not the death of her husband, not my son. "You think I don't know where the money went? The money I sent to care for Michael." I replied, ice in my voice. "Yachts, jewelry, parties. I saw the statements, Vanessa." She cocked an eyebrow, lips curving into a sneer. "That money is mine too. We're family, aren't we?" That word, family, landed like the last thrust of a blade. Family? She dared to say it after leaving Michael to die alone. I stared into the screen and let steel into my voice. "This is the last party you pay for with my money." I hung up before she could answer. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with a rage bright enough to flay the soul. I couldn't let her keep feeding on what Michael left. I couldn't let her cruelty pass as if it were nothing. I called James Ortega back. "James, I need your help." "Will, are you safe?" he asked. "I'm coming to your office now. Have the paperwork ready." An hour later, I sat in a small office that smelled of old wood and coffee. I laid out the pile of receipts and the durable financial power of attorney Michael had signed for me before my last mission. Vanessa burned through Michael's funds, mine too. All on this, I said, sliding the papers to him. He studied page after page, frowning deeper each time. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Freeze Michael's account. Cancel every linked credit card. Transfer the remaining balance to my account." James nodded. He knew me. He knew how I moved when a line had been crossed. In 20 minutes, he finished everything. "Done," he said, handing me a receipt. "Account locked. Cards canceled. Balance transferred." I nodded, feeling a weight lift, even while the grief sat there, sharp and unmoving. Outside, my phone vibrated nonstop. Vanessa called again and again. I didn't answer, but the voice messages streamed in. First came the fury. "What the hell did you do to the account? You think you can ruin my life?" Then the tone shifted to syrup. "Will, can we talk? I didn't mean any harm. I just needed the money to get by. Please reopen the account. I'm sorry." I listened to every word. Not a single mention of Michael. No apology for leaving him. Only her needs, her losses, her hunger. I tightened my grip on the pocket watch. The cold metal reminded me, stay firm. I headed back to Michael's, dead set on finding more. Anything to unmask Vanessa completely. Michael in that hospital bed kept flashing in my mind. His cold hand. His thin voice. "Dad, I love you." I couldn't allow his last breath to dissolve into her silence. She would answer for the money, and for stealing what little time my boy might have had. I pushed open the door and set the hospital bag on the dining table. The dim lamp caught the face of Michael's wristwatch and the scuffed leather of his wallet. Proofs of a life interrupted. I pulled out my battered military laptop and powered it on. Blue light washed across my face. Not a moment to collapse. Not yet. I had to protect what remained of my son. Using the emergency authorization Michael had granted me, I logged into the military bank. James's freeze order flashed on screen. I checked every safeguard, tightened alerts so any attempt at withdrawal would ping me instantly. A small relief crept in, like I just raised a steel wall between Vanessa and what belonged to Michael. Then I opened the statements from the last 3 months. The numbers sat there, cold and bright, a wordless accusation. $80,000 for a yacht party in the Gulf of Horizon. $45,000 at a fine dining temple on Seaside Point. $120,000 in a luxury fashion house downtown. Each entry another strike. This was my sweat and my scars, long nights and long miles turned into glitter for someone who couldn't even lift a phone for my son. I captured every transaction, saved them to an external drive, and to a small thumb drive I always carried. Each click was a vow. You will not get away with this. You will answer for every dollar, and for every lonely hour Michael faced. My phone rang again, an unknown bank number. "Mr. Harris," a courteous woman said, "we received a request to draw funds from a joint loan held by Ms. Vanessa Lopez and Mr. Michael Harris. Do you authorize?" I steadied my voice. "No, do not authorize. Please lock the credit file immediately." She hesitated, then confirmed. "We'll do that right away. Any other instructions?" "That will be all," I said, and ended the call. Silence filled the room, broken only by the creak of the old ceiling fan. I dialed another ally, Luis Mendoza, a telecom specialist who'd helped me ghost trace devices on classified work. "Luis, I need a location on a number, Vanessa Lopez," I said, calm but urgent. He agreed without fuss and called back 10 minutes later. "Signals offshore, out in the Gulf of Horizon, likely on a boat. Want the coordinates?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Send them." "Thank you." Dusk bled orange through the window. I locked the house, took Michael's old pickup keys, the ones I used to tease him about, saying that truck had more stories than a library, and drove to the market to buy water, canned food, and 3 heavy-duty padlocks. Back at the house, I changed the door locks, each turn of the screwdriver slamming a door on Vanessa's access. I sealed the padlocks with military tape and a coded mark, an old habit, to make any tampering obvious. As I boxed up loose papers, I found a cracked leather notebook. Michael's handwriting tugged me under. A ledger dates, amounts he'd handed to Vanessa, each one signed. $30,000, March for Vanessa's medicines. $50,000, April, Vanessa said for house repairs. I flipped pages, noting how the entries mirrored the statement spikes. She wasn't just spending my money. She was lying to Michael, making him believe it was for family care. The last piece of the puzzle slid into place, a confession written in my son's own hand. I pressed my palm to the page. "I'm sorry, son," I whispered. "I didn't know what you were carrying." Grief rolled through me, followed by a clean, hard resolve. I tucked the notebook into a box with the statements, receipts, and drives. I looked around, the chair where Michael liked to read, the small frame of father and son on the mantel, the faint old wood scent of a floor he'd scrubbed on weekends. Vanessa would never set foot in here again. I squeezed my father's pocket watch, the weight, the tick, the promise. "This isn't over, Michael," I said to the empty room. "I will protect you even now." The next morning, I drove the box of documents to the old naval base, where I still kept a small office after retirement. The room was modest, one wooden desk, 2 metal chairs, and the smell of salt drifting through the cracked window. I set the box on the floor, opened it, and began laying out every piece of evidence across the desk. Receipts, bank statements, Michael's notebook, each paper a fragment of truth. My heart thudded heavily, but I forced the soldier in me to take charge. Today wasn't for grief. Today was for precision. I drew a long breath, steadied my hands, and started cross-checking figures. Each time Michael had noted a cash amount to Vanessa, for medicine, for bills. There was a corresponding withdrawal on his account, but the withdrawals were never used for what she said. I compared the notebook with the statements side by side. The pattern emerged like a wound reopening, calculated, deliberate. One entry hit hardest. May $50,000, Vanessa said, for hospital expenses. The statement for that same day showed a $50,000 payment to a luxury spa in Seaside Point. My grip tightened around the pen until the barrel cracked. She'd lied to him, used his kindness as a vault for her greed. Then came another, a series of large transactions processed right after Michael's hospitalization. One invoice read, event coordination, $100,000, yacht birthday party, includes DJ and open bar. The date matched the night the ambulance took my son away. My blood boiled. While he lay struggling for every breath, she was out there dancing, smiling, living off his suffering. I bit down the rage and stayed focused. I needed facts, not fury. I scanned each document with my old military scanner, saving 3 copies. One in the base's secure drive, one on an external disk, and one on an encrypted cloud server I used during classified operations. Every time I pressed save, it felt like laying another brick in a wall of justice for my boy. When I finished, I turned to Michael's phone, still sealed in the hospital's plastic bag. Most of the messages were erased, but I wasn't giving up. I dug into old apps, data caches, anything. In one chat group, I recovered fragments of deleted messages. There it was, Vanessa boasting to her friends. A photo of a Louis Vuitton purse with her text below. Just bought this with Michael's money. He's not gonna last much longer anyway. Oh well. I stared at the screen, breath shaking. Those words cut deeper than any battlefield wound. She didn't just neglect him. She was waiting for him to die, turning his pain into her freedom. I went deeper, checking Michael's email. I still remember the password. He used the same one for our old family account. In his sent folder, I found a message to a luxury cruise company. Use Valentina's card. She won't be back from base for a while. If she returns, she'll have to clear it anyway. My vision blurred with fury. Vanessa had used my name, my trust, to steal from me while I was serving. She'd manipulated my son and planned it all, knowing I couldn't intervene. By midday, I had gathered everything into the box again and drove straight to James Ortega's office. He opened the door as soon as he saw me. "Will, what did you find?" he asked, his expression darkening. I set the box on his desk and removed the folders and flash drives. "Everything," I said. "Receipts, statements, messages, emails." She took Michael's money, spent it even while he was dying. James flipped through the evidence, frowning. "This is enough to start a financial case," he said gravely. "Do you want to go further?" "I want her to pay," I answered, my voice hard and sure. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Then we'll go by the book. You'll need a lawyer. I'll refer you to one who knows these cases." That afternoon, I called attorney Armando Ruiz, a specialist in family financial abuse. His voice on the phone was calm, deliberate. "Mr. Harris, can we meet tomorrow morning? Bring everything you have." "I'll be there," I said. Hanging up, I felt the faintest glimmer of strength returning, like the first light breaking through the dark. That night, I returned to Michael's house. I locked every door, shut every window. The wind from the Gulf whispered against the panes, carrying the low rumble of the waves. Inside, only silence stretched, sharp, metallic, full of ghosts. I set the sealed documents on the table beside my father's pocket watch. The old metal caught the lamplight, reflecting its worn face onto the wall. I ran my thumb over it. "You hear that, Michael?" I murmured. "Your old man's not letting this go." The next morning, I put on a pressed shirt and dark jacket, the kind I wore for official meetings, and drove downtown. Ruiz's office was a modest space between low-rise buildings, smelling of ink and paper. He stood as I entered, a man in his 40s with steady brown eyes and sleeves rolled up to the elbows. "Mr. Harris," he greeted, shaking my hand firmly. "Please sit." I set the box on his desk and began unloading its contents: bank records, receipts, phone captures, the notebook, printed messages. "This is everything," I said. My voice sounded older than I felt, like gravel dragged over metal. Ruiz adjusted his glasses and began reviewing each page, marking notes in red pencil. His eyes moved quickly, yet carefully. Occasionally he muttered under his breath, "Illegal withdrawal, clear evidence of misappropriation, pattern of deceit." For nearly an hour he studied the files while I sat there in silence, watching him analyze my pain like a crime scene. Finally, he looked up. "Do you have the notarized financial power your son signed?" he asked. I pulled it from my jacket pocket and handed it over. He examined the signature, nodded with satisfaction. "Good. This gives you full authority to act on his behalf. That's our key." He went on flipping through the evidence until he reached the yacht invoice and Vanessa's cruel text about the Louis Vuitton bag. His jaw tightened. "Mr. Harris, I've seen many cases of financial abuse. But this," he stopped, shaking his head, anger flickering behind his professional calm. "She didn't just take advantage, she exploited a dying man. This is deliberate cruelty." When he'd finished, he closed the file gently and met my eyes. "We have more than enough to take this to court. I'll file for an emergency freeze on her assets and a petition for you to administer Michael's estate. With this documentation, the judge should rule in our favor." I nodded slowly. "She's still out on the yacht," I said quietly. "I have her coordinates." A cold smile touched his lips. "Good. She won't stay hidden for long. The law can reach her, even at sea." As I left the office, a faint relief stirred in me. Not joy, never that, but purpose. For the first time since Michael's death, I had direction again. I stopped by the courthouse that afternoon to file the petitions Ruiz prepared. The building smelled of paper and dust, its halls echoing with the whir of printers and the shuffle of shoes. A weary clerk took my documents, stamped them, and confirmed the hearing. "Within 72 hours, sir. You'll be notified." I thanked her, stepped out into the blinding sunlight, and stood there for a moment beneath the courthouse steps. The sky was cloudless. Everything looked painfully normal. But for me, nothing ever would be again. That evening, I went to the military funeral home to finalize Michael's service. The director, a retired Marine himself, placed a hand on my shoulder. "He'll be buried with full honors, Colonel Harris," he said solemnly. I nodded, staring at the neatly folded dark blue uniform laid out on the table. The same kind I'd worn when I was young. A small medal glinted under the lamp. I imagined my son wearing it, strong, proud, alive. The thought tore through me. When I got back to the house, dusk had settled. The porch light glowed faintly. On the floor just inside the door lay a white envelope, slipped through the mail slot. My name on it, in Vanessa's handwriting. I tore it open. "William, we can work this out between us. I just need some money to cover debts. Please don't take things so far." I read it twice. Not a word of remorse. Not Michael's name. Just money. Always money. I folded the letter and slid it into the evidence folder without replying. She didn't deserve an answer. The morning of the hearing, I stood before the mirror in my old dress uniform, navy blue with polished buttons, medals gleaming on my chest. Each one told a story. Rescue missions, long deployments, nights without sleep. But today I wore them not for pride or country. I wore them for Michael, for justice. I fastened the pocket watch to my belt chain and whispered to my reflection, "Let's finish this, son." Then I walked out the door into the bright, salt-scented morning. The courtroom was large and cold, the fluorescent lights harsh against polished wood. The air smelled faintly of damp paper. I entered with a box of evidence pressed against my chest, Ruiz at my side. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat in an expensive black dress, hair perfectly curled, makeup immaculate. She looked calm, too calm, as if this were just another performance. The latest foam glittered in her manicured hand. She tried to look tired, pitiful. Everyone in the room could see through it. The judge, a stern man in his 50s, called the session to order. Ruiz rose, setting the thick file on the desk. "Your Honor," he began, "we present clear evidence of financial abuse and neglect by Ms. Vanessa Lopez toward her husband, the late Mr. Michael Harris." He moved to the screen and began projecting images, bank statements, invoices for yachts, jewelry, lavish dinners. Then he showed the duplicated withdrawals, the ones that proved Vanessa took cash even after Michael gave her funds. Finally, the photographs, Vanessa laughing on a yacht, champagne in hand, while Michael lay dying in a hospital bed just miles away. Each picture sliced through me. I heard again my son's fading voice, "Dad, I love you," and the long, sharp tone of the heart monitor. She hadn't only stolen his money, she'd stolen the time he might have had left. I clenched my fists under the table to keep from trembling. The young attorney beside Vanessa stood to respond, voice slick and rehearsed. "Your Honor, these expenses fall within the legal rights of the spouse. The illness was terminal. My client cannot be blamed for the inevitable." I watched Vanessa lower her gaze, avoiding my eyes. She knew the truth, and it was written in the way her fingers tightened around that phone like a shield. Ruiz asked to call a witness. Dr. Reed entered, his expression solemn. If Mr. Harris had been admitted earlier and received adequate care, he could have lived another 1 or 2 years. He stated clearly. No one contacted us. No one visited him during his stay. The room fell silent. Vanessa's posture faltered. I saw her jaw clench, her facade cracking. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Harris, would you like to speak?" I stood, the weight of the uniform settling heavy on my shoulders, but giving me strength. I looked at Vanessa, then at the judge. "I was away serving my country," I said, voice trembling but firm. "I sent money so my son would be cared for. But no one has the right to use my absence as a reason to let my child die alone." When I finished, the courtroom was still. Even the clerk's pen paused mid-note. Vanessa stared at the floor, but I saw no remorse in her eyes, only fear. The judge nodded once, reviewing the files before him. Then he spoke. "The court orders the freezing of all assets belonging to the estate of Michael Harris. Temporary control is granted to Mr. William Harris. Ms. Vanessa Lopez is hereby prohibited from accessing any property or funds until further notice." The sound of the gavel struck like thunder. Vanessa shot up, her face red. "You'll regret this, old man. You can't do this to me," she screamed, voice sharp and desperate. 2 bailiffs moved toward her, guiding her out as her shouts echoed off the walls. And for the first time since my son's death, I felt something close to justice. Not peace, not yet, but justice beginning to take shape. When the hearing ended, I gathered the papers from the table and slid them into my worn leather briefcase. The courtroom's echo lingered, the sharp strike of the gavel still ringing in my ears. Outside, the midday sun over Harborview burned bright, glinting off the medals on my uniform. But I didn't feel victorious. Justice, yes, but not triumph. Michael would never walk through the door again. I took a deep breath, the salt from the nearby gulf mixing with the city air, and whispered to myself, "It's done, son. We did it." There was no time for rest. I went straight to the bank, the court order in hand. The manager, a polite woman with tired eyes, reviewed the document carefully. "Mr. Harris, all assets have now been transferred under your authority," she said. "How would you like to proceed?" I looked at her, steady. Divided in two. I said, half to my personal account. The other half will fund a trust. She raised an eyebrow. A trust, sir? Yes, I said. The Michael Harris Fund. For cancer patients who have no family to help them. I'd made the decision the night before the funeral, staring at Michael's folded uniform under the sterile lights of the mortuary. I'd promised that his name wouldn't die with him, that he would still protect lives, just as he'd once promised to protect mine. Within a week, the Michael Harris Fund was officially registered as a nonprofit organization under the Department of Social Development. The first call I made was to St. Gabriel Medical Center. I want to start by helping patients with terminal illness, especially those who've been abandoned. I told Dr. Reed. His voice softened. You're doing something extraordinary, Mr. Harris. I'll connect you with the right people. By the end of that first week, 12 patients had received full coverage for their medication, funded by the money that Vanessa had once spent on yachts and champagne. The irony wasn't lost on me. Each invoice I signed for treatment felt like taking back what she had stolen, piece by piece. 2 months later, I expanded the fund. We partnered with a mobile medical unit that traveled through the deserts and mountains of Arizona, bringing basic health care to small towns where nobody else went. On one of those inspection visits, I stopped by a hospital in Sierra County, not far from the border. The corridors smelled of disinfectant and dust. In the pediatric oncology ward, I saw a boy sitting upright in bed, thin as a whisper, hugging a worn-out teddy bear. His skin was pale from chemotherapy, his eyes dark and too serious for his age. A nurse noticed me watching. That's David, she said softly. 8 years old. Leukemia. He lost his parents in a car accident. He's been here alone for months. I walked to his bedside. He looked up at me with those wide, searching eyes. Hey there, champ, I said, lowering myself onto the chair beside him. I'm Will. He studied me a second. Are you a soldier? I smiled faintly. I was. A long time ago. He clutched his bear tighter. I don't want to die, he whispered. I just want a family. That single sentence shattered something inside me. I reached out and took a small hand. It was cold, fragile, like bird bones under skin. You're not alone, David, I said softly. You've got one now. Dr. Reed told me later that David had a strong chance of survival if he kept up with consistent treatment. He just needs stability, the doctor said. Someone who won't let go halfway. I didn't even hesitate. The Michael Harris Fund would cover every bill, every medicine, every session. Weeks passed. Every time I returned to that hospital, David's color brightened a little more. I brought him small gifts, a model airplane, a baseball cap, sometimes just a story. I told him about the ocean, about the quiet strength of waves, about courage in the face of storms. One afternoon he asked, Mr. Will, were you ever scared out there? I chuckled, brushing a hand over my gray beard. Every day, kid. But I learned something. No matter how rough the sea gets, if you keep rowing, you'll always reach the shore. He nodded solemnly, holding his bear. I'm gonna row too, he said. Every visit became a small ritual. I'd bring flan from a bakery down the street and sit beside him, helping him eat spoon by spoon. Sometimes he'd laugh. Sometimes he'd fall asleep halfway through a story, the teddy bear pressed to his chest. And each time, I'd look at him and see Michael, not the man he became, but the little boy who once built kites with me by the shore. 3 months later, David was stronger. His blood counts were rising. His smile came easier. The day before I left town, as I was tucking his blanket, he looked at me suddenly serious. Mr. Will. Yes, son. He hesitated. Can you be my grandpa? The world stopped moving for a second. I saw Michael's face flash in my memory. The same shy hope in his eyes when he asked me as a child if I'd ever leave again. My throat tightened. I reached for David and pulled him close. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll be your grandpa. He hugged me so hard the bear squished between us. I felt warmth return to a part of me I thought had died with Michael. That night, I began the process of adoption. The social worker raised an eyebrow when I explained. You're 71, Mr. Harris, she said gently. You sure you want to start over? I smiled. I'm not starting over, I said. I'm finishing what I began. The background checks, the paperwork, the interviews, it all took months. During that time, I turned Michael's old house into a home again. I painted David's new room in deep blue, the color he said looked like the sky. I bought a single bed, a small desk, and placed his teddy bear on the pillow. Each stroke of paint, each nail driven into the wall, felt like a promise. He would never feel alone again. When the adoption was finalized, I drove to the hospital to bring David home. He stood by the entrance in a small jacket, thin but smiling, his teddy bear tucked under his arm. When he saw me, he ran forward. "Grandpa Will," he shouted, laughing. I caught him in my arms, the sound of his laughter filling the air like sunlight. We drove back toward the coast, the old pickup humming along the highway. The scent of salt grew stronger as we neared the Gulf of Horizon. David pressed his face to the window, watching the waves glimmer in the distance. "Is that where you used to live?" he asked. "That's home, son," I said, my hand resting gently on his shoulder. "Our home now." That first dinner together was simple, tacos, just the way Michael used to like them. David ate with both hands, laughing when salsa dripped down his chin. I wiped it away, chuckling. "You eat like your uncle," I said. He looked up. Would he have liked me? I swallowed the lump in my throat. "He'd be proud of you, kid. More than you'll ever know." Over the following months, the house filled again, with noise, with laughter, with life. I repainted the living room a warm sand color. I planted bougainvillea along the porch, red blooms swaying in the ocean breeze. In the back garden, I hung a new hammock. David liked to lie there reading, the bear on his chest, his hair glowing gold in the sunlight. Michael's things, his books, his uniform, the photo of us by the shore. I stored them carefully in the cedar chest in my bedroom, not to erase him, but to preserve him. Every night before bed, I'd open it, touch the watch he used to wear, and whisper, "You're still here, son." The Michael Harris Fund kept growing. We reached small towns in Texas, New Mexico, and eventually across the border. Dozens of patients received early treatment, many of them surviving what once would have been fatal. Each success felt like a pulse of life returning to Michael's name. David often sat beside me while I handled paperwork. Sometimes he'd draw, me in uniform, him holding the teddy bear, the ocean behind us. "That's us," he'd say proudly. "The C Team." I'd laugh softly. "Yeah, the C Team." Once a month, I took him with me on fund missions. We handed out food, medicine, toys to families who had nothing. David ran ahead, handing out cookies and sweets, his laughter bouncing through the dusty streets. "Can I bring more candy next time, Grandpa?" he'd ask, his pockets already empty. "Only if you promise to share it all," I'd answer, smiling as I watched him spread light the way his uncle once did. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I joined the seniors' kayak club down at the marina. I'd row into the open water, feeling the cool spray on my skin, the rhythm steady, one breath, one stroke. David would sit on the dock, waving and shouting, "Faster, Grandpa. A fish is chasing you." His laughter carried across the waves, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Every evening, we tended our small garden. He grew tomatoes. I planted basil and mint. The first harvest filled a basket. That night, we cooked pasta with the fresh tomatoes. "This is better than tacos," David announced with sauce smeared across his cheek. I laughed and wiped it off, heart full. Weeks passed into months. The lawyer, Ruiz, called occasionally. "Vanessa's been trying to appeal again," he'd say, "but the judge keeps denying her claims." "Let her try," I'd reply. She already lost everything that mattered. I never responded to her calls or letters. She no longer had a place in our lives. One morning, David burst through the front door, waving a certificate from school. "Grandpa Will, I got the highest grade in class." His grin was pure sunlight. I stood by the window, the pocket watch in my palm, catching the morning light. I smiled and pulled him into a hug. "That's my boy," I said softly. We stood there, surrounded by the sound of the sea, laughter in the air. In that moment, I realized something. I had finally come home, not just to a house, but to a life reborn in love and purpose. On the wall above the mantel, two photographs hung side by side. One of Michael and me, long ago, flying that red kite by the water. And beside it, one of David and me, standing in the same spot, the same sky above us. Beneath them, a note I'd written in my own trembling hand. Michael is always with us. I stepped back, looked at the pictures, and for the first time in many years, truly smiled. Home wasn't bricks or walls. It was what lived inside us. Memory, hope, and the courage to love again. A year passed. The Gulf wind still smelled of salt and promise, and our small house on Maple Street had found its rhythm again. Mornings began with the whistle of the old coffee pot and David's chatter as he got ready for school. I'd stand by the porch, mug in hand, watching him race down the road with his backpack bouncing, the sun catching his hair. Sometimes I'd still expect to see Michael walking beside him, grown now, smiling that easy smile. But life has a way of giving back in different forms. The Michael Harris Fund had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We had branches in 5 states, each one helping people like my son, those left behind, forgotten, or fighting alone. Every month, letters arrived from families thanking us for giving them hope. I kept them in a wooden box by the window. On quiet nights, I'd read a few aloud to David before bed. "See this one," I'd say, showing him a letter from a woman in Nevada. "Her brother's alive today because we paid for his surgery." David would listen wide-eyed, then whisper, "We're heroes, right, Grandpa?" I'd smile. "Not heroes, son. Just people doing what's right." Yet, even amid the peace, the past never vanished completely. Some nights, I'd wake before dawn, the sound of the ventilator still echoing in my dreams. Michael's weak voice whispering, "Dad, I love you." I'd rise quietly, walk to the living room, and sit by the photographs on the wall. The red kite, the sea, the faces I'd loved and lost. The grief was softer now, but it never really left. It simply folded itself into who I'd become. One evening in early autumn, Ruiz called. His tone was formal, cautious. "Will," he began, "Vanessa has filed for early release from her sentence. She claims good behavior and psychological distress." I didn't answer right away. I could hear the low hum of the sea through the phone line, steady and endless. "Is there a hearing?" I asked. "Yes. Next week. You don't have to attend, but I thought you'd want to know." I thanked him, hung up, and stood for a while staring at the ocean through the window. Vanessa's name no longer filled me with rage, just a kind of tired pity. The woman who destroyed her own life, chasing emptiness. She'd have to live with that forever, and with the knowledge that the man she betrayed had left a legacy far greater than her greed could ever touch. When the hearing came, I didn't go. I stayed home, repairing the small boat I'd bought for David and me. The plank smelled of varnish and salt. The sunlight poured through the trees in quiet ribbons. A few days later, Ruiz called again. "The court denied her request," he said. "She'll serve the full term. They also froze her last personal assets for restitution to the fund." I nodded. "Thank you, Armando. Let it rest now." After that, I didn't speak her name again. Winter arrived gentle and cool over Harborview. David and I spent Christmas decorating the porch with old marine lights I'd kept from base housing. The bulbs flickered in red and blue, reflected on the wet pavement after rain. That night, we sat by the fireplace, cocoa in our hands, the soft crackle filling the silence. "Grandpa," David said suddenly, "can we visit Uncle Michael's grave tomorrow?" "Of course, son," I replied. "It's time you met him properly." The next morning, we drove to the military cemetery. The rows of white headstones gleamed under a pale sky. I walked slowly with David beside me, our footsteps sinking into the damp grass until we reached the one that bore my son's name. Michael Harris, beloved son, husband, and friend. 1988 to 2024. Semper Fidelis. I knelt, my knees pressing into the cold ground. David stood quietly beside me, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. He placed them at the base of the stone. "Hi, Uncle Michael," he said softly. "Grandpa tells me you like the ocean." "Me too. I'm learning to swim now." His voice trembled a little, but he smiled. I touched the name carved into the marble. You'd have liked him, I whispered. He's got your heart. We sat there a long time. The sound of waves reached us faintly from beyond the dunes, merging with the rustle of wind through the pines. I closed my eyes and, for a brief moment, felt Michael's presence, calm, steady, like sunlight on water. When we returned home, I took out my father's pocket watch, the one that had followed me through every mission, every return, every goodbye. It was still ticking, slow, sure, unbroken. I handed it to David. This belonged to your great-grandfather, I said. Then to me. And now it's yours. His eyes widened. Really, I said. It's more than a watch. It's a promise that no matter where you go, you'll always come back home. He clutched it like treasure. I'll take care of it, Grandpa. I swear. Time moved gently after that. Each day unfolded like a gift. Ordinary, precious, alive. David grew taller, stronger. His laughter filled the rooms that once echoed with silence. Every morning, he'd race to the beach with the red kite, its tail whipping through the wind. Sometimes I'd join him, though my knees protested. I'd stand there watching the kite rise high into the blue, just as I had with Michael decades ago. Only now, the moment didn't hurt, it healed. In the spring of the following year, the Michael Harris Fund held its first official gala. Ruiz organized everything: music, veterans, doctors, survivors. They asked me to speak, but I hesitated until the last moment. When I finally stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell silent. My son Michael, I began, taught me something I'd forgotten during a lifetime of service. That duty means nothing if it doesn't begin at home. My voice shook. I failed him once, but I was given a second chance to honor him. Through every life we save and every child we help, the measure of a man isn't how many battles he wins, but how many hearts he protects. The applause was soft at first, then swelling like the tide. I looked out at the crowd and saw faces glowing in candlelight, patients, nurses, volunteers. And in the front row, David, dressed in his little suit, grinning wide, clutching the pocket watch in both hands. That night, after everyone left, I walked down to the pier alone. The sea was calm, the horizon a line of silver under the moon. I leaned on the railing, listening to the gentle hush of the waves. A gull drifted overhead. Somewhere beyond, the gulf of horizon stretched into darkness and light. Michael, I said quietly. I kept my promise. The wind answered with a soft sigh, lifting the edge of my jacket. I imagined my son's voice in it, faint but certain. I know, Dad. Years rolled on. David grew into a fine young man, bright, determined kind. He joined the fund as coordinator, traveling to small towns to deliver medicine and food. Every time he came home, he'd tell me stories about the people he met, the children, the mothers, the soldiers. His words painted pictures of hope. By the time I turned 76, I'd begun to slow down. My hands trembled when I poured coffee. My steps grew shorter. David took over most of the work. You've done enough, Grandpa, he'd tell me with that easy smile. Let me row now. And he did, beautifully. One morning, I woke before dawn. The sky outside the window was still deep blue, the stars faint. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the old watch ticking softly beside me. My breath misted in the chill air. The world was utterly still, like the moment before a tide turns. David came out rubbing his eyes. You're up early, he said, sitting beside me. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Too quiet. He smiled, the seas waiting. We walked down to the beach together. The horizon was just beginning to glow. I watched the boy know the man who had given my life back to me, and pride swelled like a rising wave. He turned to me. You okay, Grandpa? I nodded. More than okay. I'm home. The sun rose slow and golden, spilling across the water, touching everything with light. I felt warmth spread through me, not from the sun, but from peace. A lifetime of battles, grief, and love had brought me here, to this quiet, to this boy, to this moment. I looked out at the horizon one last time and smiled. Keep rowing, David, I said softly. He frowned a little, not understanding yet. Always, he promised. And as the waves rolled in and the morning light grew stronger, I closed my eyes. The sound of the sea carrying me away. Steady, endless home. Weeks later, David stood on the same porch, the pocket watch in his hand. It was still ticking, steady as ever. On the wall behind him hung the two photographs, the red kite with Michael, the new one with David, and beneath them the same note, written in his grandfather's hand. Michael is always with us. He smiled through his tears, lifted the watch to his ear, and whispered, "And so are you, Grandpa." The wind rose off the gulf, warm and gentle, carrying the scent of salt and memory. Above the house, the red kite danced once more against the endless blue sky.